Welcome to the April 3rd City of Port Angeles Council meeting. We're going to start with a roll call. Mayor Burke, present.
Deputy Mayor Dexter.
Here.
Councilmember French.
Here.
Councilmember King. Here. Councilmember Meredith.
Here.
Councilmember Moran.
Here.
Councilmember Strong Warren.
Here.
Manager McKean.
Here.
Attorney Moore.
Here.
Thank you. And let's all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Welcome, guys. We have one piece of ceremonial matter. Becca Corby, please come up here. She's the Executive Director of Healthy Families at Allen County. Welcome. Hello. We've got a proclamation for you, and I will read it from here. It says, Sexual Assault Awareness Month is ready for April. Whereas rape and sexual assault and sexual harassment affects men, women, and children of all racial, cultural, and economic backgrounds, and whereas everyday men, women, and children suffer the pain and trauma of sexual assault, from verbal harassment and intimidation to molestation and rape, this crime occurs far too frequently, goes unreported far too often, and leaves long-lasting physical and emotional scars. And whereas about 2/3 of sexual assault are committed by someone who is known to the victim, and the emotional and physical scars resulting from sexual violence are often severe and long-lasting. And whereas we must work together to educate our entire population about what can be done to prevent sexual assault, support survivors and their significant others, and ensure that survivors are not re-victimized. And whereas with leadership, dedication, and encouragement, there is compelling evidence that we can be successful in reducing crimes against citizens through increased awareness and prevention, and by holding those who commit acts of violence accountable for their actions. And whereas this recognition will increase the awareness of sexual assault issues and encourage individuals to seek the help from those agencies providing services to sexual assault victims. And whereas it is time for all of us to start conversations regarding sexual violence, increased awareness, take appropriate action, help victims, heal lives, and support one another to create a safer environment for all. Now, therefore, I, Sissy Brook, Mayor, on behalf of the City Council of Port Angeles, do hereby declare the month of April 2018 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and call upon all citizens of Port Angeles to speak out against sexual violence and to support community efforts to prevent and respond to these crimes. And so here is the proclamation. You're welcome. Would you like to say a couple of words?
Well, all right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So council members, mayor, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Becca, and I'm the Director of Healthy Families, which, for those of you who don't know, is a small private nonprofit agency serving victims of domestic and sexual violence. and we house the only nationally accredited children's advocacy center on the Olympic Peninsula. That said, domestic violence and sexual assault are not decreasing, they are on the rise. For those of you who read the paper over the last week, you'll see that there were some really icky people doing some really icky things to our most precious commodity, and that's our children. I would like to recognize one of those people is here. Every Sexual Assault Awareness Month, the very large group of us, including prosecutors, law enforcement, law advocates, Child Protective Services, nominate people for what's called the Gratitude Award. This is an award that goes to, it can be any human being who is doing something above and beyond for those who are weaker, smaller, hurt, damaged, frightened. And one of the recipients this year was our own Detective Shane Martin. And I would like Shane to come forward if you would, and Brian, do you want to come too? And we can really embarrass him. He's a blusher. And so, for the sake of convenience, we give these awards at the county commissioners meeting sometime during April, and that's what happened this morning. And other recipients are Gerald Brown from Department of Corrections, which a lot of people who I work with, my colleagues, think that we're nuts because we have such great collaboration with law enforcement, Department of Corrections, hospital, Child Protective Services, which normally would not, it is not the case. But we are very, very blessed and gifted in Port Angeles to have a law enforcement agency that's got brains and heart. And Shane is one of our most gifted child forensic interviewers, and this is a very fragile environment to work in. When you have a 7-year-old child who's been raped, who's going to question that child? And it better be someone who's highly skilled, has a heart. And Shane brings, and I said it this morning, and it's kind of an odd word to put in a relationship in the same sentence of a man, but he has a gentility about him. Not just a gentleness, but he brings a true gentility that encompasses understanding and comfort and safety. And I have probably been privy to, I don't know, 250, 300 child interviews, and Shane is at the top of the list. So we're very, very grateful that he's in our community, so thank you very much.
So thank you, Becca, and thank you, Ms. Mayor. And Shane is truly one of the best. Those of you that know Shane and work with Shane, they don't get any better than him. And we work with Shane. We learn something from him every day, and he's really very deserving of this award. And he, as really modest and the way Shane is, he wouldn't necessarily want to get the recognition, but it's recognition for everybody on his team and the police department and the great work these guys do. So thanks very much, Shane.
I told Shane at the last multidisciplinary team meeting at the Children's Advocacy Center, where we were talking about recent cases, I said he would be the recipient of the Gratitude Award. He said, no thanks. And then he lied to his boss and said I never told him, so that's what shy is. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for all you do. I tell you, we have the best people in this city. We do. All right. So we are on to the public comment period, but before we start that, I wanted to modify the agenda and see if council feels okay about this. After the public hearing, I would like to move the other considerations, the urban forestry, on to right after the public hearing, so then that way we can move forward with that, if that's okay. Any questions?
Good idea. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds great. Thank you.
We planned a lot this
All right, so we will start with the public comment. Jerry, we got a couple people that have signed up here. And the first person, and so we've got the public hearing that's at 6:30. So anybody that did not sign up for the reusable plastic bags, well, everybody signed up for the plastic bags. So is there anybody else out there that did not want to speak about the plastic bags and would like to come up and talk to council about anything? Please come stand up and go to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
This one?
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is John Wordsworth. Address is 441 Hudson Road in Port Angeles. Thank you for your time. So I'm a local urban forester in town, and excited to have Ben Thompson with the state here to present later on. I hold a position with the Washington Community Forestry Council on their executive advisory panel. And that is how I'm here today talking. Just earlier this year, Port Angeles lost their Tree City USA designation, something that Ben will talk about later on, I think. And I think that's a pretty big deal for the citizens and anyone who's really interested in trees here. There's a group of engaged citizens, horticultural professionals, arborists, and urban foresters in the city who are interested in the proper care and planting of urban trees within our community. And we would like to somehow engage and collaborate with the city and the stakeholders involved with trees via a tree board or via some direction of reinstating the Tree City USA designation. And I'd just like to encourage your consideration of trees and getting that designation back to the city. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anybody else who would like to, please? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Paul Forrest. I live at 127 West 7th Street here in town, just a few blocks away. I'm here with John and some of his colleagues on behalf of trees. The city of Port Angeles was once a Tree City USA member, and I think we can do that again. It's not terribly difficult, but one of the first things we need to do is form a tree board. So on the 24th of this month, at the library, there will be a meeting at 6 o'clock of anyone interested in forming a tree board. I hope some folks show up that would like to do that. I'd like to work in collaboration with the city in managing and improving and expanding and enhancing the urban canopy, particularly in the residential areas, but other parts of it too. We need to form a tree board to get back into the program. We need to hold Arbor Day. I've talked with the public, with schools, they're happy to do that. And we will not need to get a new Tree City USA sign because the old one's still in place, so you can save some bucks there. And eventually we'd like to grow out trees for the city, using the list and working with the city on ones that work best in public right-of-ways, particularly for residential areas. So in about 5 or 6 years' time, the city should be in a position to receive each year 50 to 100 trees, really expand the urban canopy. So that's what we're working on. We hope we have your blessing, and you'll hear more from us later. Thank you.
Can you repeat, you said it was on the 24th of this month?
24th of April, 6 o'clock at the
6
library on Lawrence.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to speak to council, not about the bags, but about anything else? Please, yeah, please come to it.
Good evening, my name is Jane Vanderhoof. I live at 114 West 7th Street. And I've noticed living there that the street sweeper comes by once in a while. I don't know if it's on a schedule, but my street is filthy because there's been 2 dead cars in front of it, plus my car, and I never know when he's going to come. And I'm wondering, why are we spending money hiring a street sweeper when he has to go in and out and in and out and in and out of the streets between the cars, and it's not a very effective thing. So that's just something I'm curious about. So just wanted you to hear it.
Thank you so much. I must admit, I've always been curious about that schedule as well, because it's true, my car's out in the street and it goes around me, and I'm like, if I had known that, I would have moved my car. But I know it becomes hard for them to do that, but. Anybody else who would like to speak to council on any issue? No? Okay, well, seeing none, we will move on to the late items. Are there any late items from staff?
No, there's not.
I'm
No.
not. Thank you. Yeah, Councilmember Kidd.
Yes, Madam Mayor, because of public comment, I would like to ask staff to prepare for a future meeting to inform us. I didn't know we lost our status as Tree City USA. I was pretty proud of that. So if we could get some information at next meeting, why we lost it and what we have to do to regain it, I just would really appreciate that.
That would be wonderful, thank you. Anybody else? So like I said, I've got one. I would like, we've been talking about our council think tank, and I know because of previous meeting, it got canceled on April 10th, so we're looking at a new date of April 19th from 6 to 8. And so just want to put that on the calendar. So that'll be April 19th, it's a Thursday evening. So it'll be our first city council think tank. The idea is that we're just going to do some brainstorming, some figuring ideas out, and so just wanted to let you know it's going to be an open meeting from 6 to 8. So on to, so we still got 10 minutes before the public hearing. So let's go on to the consent agenda. Is there any items on the consent agenda that need to be pulled or any questions? Yes?
I just wanted to compliment the fire department for their MOA with the U.S. Coast Guard Air Station. I think that's commendable.
Anybody else? Yes. Yes, on Meredith.
I wanted discussion on the professional services agreement with Sargent Engineers.
Okay. Do you want to just? Yeah, go ahead.
I spoke with Dan about it earlier, and it seems like you're not getting the whole, from the information we have in the packet, it seems that you're not getting the whole information on that, what that pier load would take, because it says it's only doing above water line. And Dan assures me they are going to figure that out. I just wanted to bring that up, that it doesn't give you a full picture of what the load is on the lower pilings.
I'm not a structural engineer, but I'll ask our city engineer if she can enlighten us a little bit on that. So.
The structural engineering is going to be done on the part that we can see up above. And then the lower part involves a diver. And previously on other projects, we have sent a diver down, but that would likely be a second structural response, or quite possibly after Sargent gets out there and sees what they can see from a boat out on the water and looks down, they can elect to hire a diver as a sub-consultant, at which point we would be asking to amend the contract.
Answer what you need.
I'd like to pull item 7.
Okay, we'll pull item 7. Okay, so let me read the consent agenda. One, the city council minutes from March 20th, 2018. Expenditure report from March 10th to 23. March 10th to 23, 2018, in the amount of $2,918,217.19. Purchase of cardiac defibrillator. Cultural Resources Services Award Agreement. The Washington State Traffic Commission Interagency Highway Safety Grant Agreement. MOA with U.S. Coast Guard Air Station, Port Angeles, the Sanitary Sewer and Stormdrain Cleaning and CCTV final acceptance, and the Planning Commission appointment.
Move to accept the consent agenda, that's right.
All right, so we got Motion and second to accept the consent agenda as read. Any discussion?
I'd just like to point out that we're very lucky to have some of the experience that the planning commission applicant had. I was very impressed by that.
Very impressed with that application as well. I was very grateful for that. All right, so we've got a motion on the table and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So it's a unanimous vote on the consent agenda as read. So number 7, amendment to the professional services agreement with Sargent Engineering. Do you want any further discussion?
I'm not in support of it. We're either gonna do it right or we're not gonna do it at all, and I'm not in favor of spending X number of dollars and then all of a sudden now we have to amend the contract for X number of dollars more, when I still don't believe from a boat they're gonna see top to bottom of that pole. Just because they don't see something on the top is not necessarily what they see on the bottom. So, that's why I pulled it.
Okay, and I guess I do have a question now that you bring that up. Is that, would Sargent Engineering also be the one who would be hiring the diver to do the engineering below?
Most likely, the diver would be a sub-consultant to Sargent Engineers. Because what the structural engineer would do is, the diver would have a camera, and the structural engineer would watch to see what the diver's seeing, and they would say, oh, look at that, or poke at that, or measure that, as they dive and look at the underwater part.
And does that make sense then, that maybe the contract goes back so that it's a complete picture of the poles, or is there a reason why this is separated like that?
I think they just wanted to see, again, you're absolutely right, you're not gonna see from down all the way to the bottom, but I thought that they would be able to have some sort of an understanding. Does it, at water line, you know, you can see a couple feet, 3 feet down, does it look horribly rotten, or does the member resemble that which is above water, and would they be able to extrapolate the strength based on what they can or cannot see?
In other words, you could make a conclusion just from the surface that that piling needs replaced without having to go underwater to see it.
Certainly, you would be able to make that conclusion.
So
If it needed to be replaced on the top, you'd replace it all the way down, yes.
I do know that we had a discussion during one of our staff meetings a couple of weeks ago when this first came up, and Director Delicott, who's not here tonight, it really has to do with evaluating, again, whether you can put a crane on city pier, but it has to do with putting the city floats in, and the need to have that for the city floats. We could pull it tonight until Director Delicott could provide additional information. I can't remember, and I apologize for that, exactly what he said regarding that evaluation. I do know that there were some grant funds left over that would pay for this evaluation, but I can't answer the question about above water, below water. I do know that in order for this to move forward at the time, he had a great explanation. I just can't remember what it is. That was a couple weeks ago. So if the council would like, we could pull it, or if the council does approve it and it looks like there does need to be something done with that, we won't move forward to put it together as a complete package. But it does have to do with city floats going in, and I know that there has been a lot of interest in trying to get those floats in as soon as we could. So,
Would this, do you know if this would delay that issue of putting the floats in?
you know, again, without Corey here to tell me, it may or it may not. I don't know. I don't know what the schedule was for that. I do know that he wanted to get it done as soon as he could, but I know he's really excited, as we all are, in getting the floats in. And again, this is part of that project. So, but I'm not, again, I'm not any type of engineer, let alone a structural engineer. And but he's been working on this and has been working with Public Works to put together the contract, but he's been taking the lead on it.
So I would say on some level I'm torn, because I realize that there's a lot of expedience getting floats in. We have this Maritime Festival coming up. We want to make sure that we're prepared for tourist season, that that festival will be successful. At the same time, I feel like we need to have a broader conversation about the pier on some level. You know, what's the right level of maintenance to do? What's the right level of, so I'm kind of torn.
So can we have then that conversation in the next meeting? I mean, this may be something that can move forward, which is a very quick evaluation of the piers from above, that could at least identify the piers that need to be replaced.
The broader discussion about City Pier, we are going to have sometime in the near future. It won't be the next meeting because we have to talk about the rails and a lot of other aspects, not just the structural aspects. And I know that there's work that we need to do in a fairly urgent way for the railings on City Pier. So that, I think that's something on all of our radar screen, and we've had some discussions on that.
And so I would say that it is kind of crucial that we get a thorough picture, as Councilman Merritt said, of the structure and the condition before we really start making council level decisions. So I was just going to say, it sounds to me like what you can see above ground or from the water level might influence knowing whether and how the underwater work needs to happen. So I see it making sense to go forward, getting that information so we can have a thorough discussion with all the information.
And then we'll go Councilmember Kent.
Because it's not just the ramps. It says in here, routine maintenance, community events, cruise ship supply, servicing, and emergency response. I don't think Mr. Dubuque wants to lose an ambulance off the pier. And on top of that, is Sargent engineers prepared to examine topside above waterline and put their stamp and approve that that is structurally sound without looking below that waterline?
Madam Mayor, I'd be happy to address that, and Councilmember Meredith is absolutely correct. There's a number of other events that take place on City Pier, and we're often wanting to look at what the load requirements are for City Pier. In addition to that, we're getting a much larger cruise ship coming in this year, and they have asked questions relative to structural loads, so we need to find the answers to those. I think it would be very valuable to move forward with the scope of work that's been identified in the council packet this evening, noting that if we feel we need to do more, we will certainly bring that back to council and get it amended. But at this point in time, we will absolutely insist upon a stamped engineered letter that validates the load for City Pier. That will be a requirement that we receive back from the structural engineer at the end of the day. We'll make sure that happens. If they don't have enough conclusive information based on the work that they do, we will be coming back to council to ask for an amendment. But I do think there are some significant timing needs that Mr. Delicott is not present to speak to this evening, and for that reason, it would be very helpful to move forward.
Councilmember Kent.
I agree. We have a Maritime Festival coming up, and we have 2 cruise ships coming in, and our floats have been advertised as we will have them. We've done without them. We really need them back. I appreciate the thoroughness and thoughtfulness of Councilmember Meredith and the questions he's asked. If we can go ahead and prove this, Mr. West will bring back to us any concerns and future information and follow up. But putting this off right now, the staff obviously, and I'm sorry Mr. Delicott isn't here, he's had a death in his family and so he's not able to join us, but I have confidence in him. I have confidence that he wouldn't put this on our agenda unless he has thoroughly vetted it. And then also our time frame is crucial. So I don't want to hold it up. I wish to vote on it at this time and move ahead for the community.
Jim.
I would agree with that statement that we need to move forward on this. This to me, and I appreciate your concern about the worthiness of the pier, but I think the staff has done enough of a job vetting this that we should at least support this and then move forward. I happen to be on the Maritime Festival Committee, and it would be an absolute disaster if those folks were not in time for this festival. Now, you may say that that's a poor reason to move ahead on this, but I would argue that this wouldn't have come up if Corey hadn't done this. So I would encourage us to take a vote on it tonight and move forward.
I move to approve and authorize the city manager to sign amendment number 1, professional service agreement PSA 2018-02 with Sargent Engineers Incorporated in the amount of $20,283, increasing the total contract not to exceed amount to $70,349, and to make minor modifications to the agreement if necessary. The completion date of the agreement remains December 31st, 2018.
Second.
Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussions on this motion?
I was just going to reiterate that I think Councilmember Meredith's concerns are founded, and I feel confident in the answer that we've gotten back from staff regarding moving forward at this point, and that it won't be, we're not skirting the issue, we're moving forward with the understanding that that's a concern.
And I will agree with that, because I'm very glad to know that we will get that engineering stamp as to the local appeal. So with that being said, any more discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Okay, the motion carries 6-1. All right, it is past 6:30, so we're going to move on to our public hearing of the evening, the Public Act Policy Ordinance. And so we've got some folks that have signed up for this, and so we'll start with them. So James Bloor. Yes, please come up. State your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Jaden Sploor, and my address is 2208 East 3rd Avenue, Wales Edition. I am here to speak about plastic bags. The situation is way worse than anybody thought. The plastic is ruining our oceans and poisoning fish, and what will happen when we eat those? I am 10 years old and I love seafood, and I want to eat it without being worried that I may be poisoned and get sick. This initiative is just a small thing to ask for, but it can make a very big impact. Like instead of using the plastic bags, use the reusable bags. And also, if you get the stronger, thicker plastic bags, you could use those also. And so we wouldn't have to double bake them because they would be thicker. And you wouldn't have to go back and get more if they break. And also, you may not get sick from washing your reusable bag.
Thank you, James. Oh, do you have more? Or you're done? Thank you so much for speaking. The next speaker is Jane Darakunas.
All right, my name is Jane Darakunas. I'm at 4006 Fairmount Avenue. And probably the only one proposed to be here. I would like to talk about the two other sides of the issue. The first being environmental, covering the overall carbon footprint of plastic and paper grocery bags and the various reusable bags. Second, the rights and responsibility of individuals and businesses. The UK Environmental Agency did a comprehensive study on these items, and the conclusion was that the plastic grocery bags made the least carbon footprint. If you reuse it just once as garbage bags, the carbon footprint is virtually a wash. And compared to the other bags, you have to reuse paper bags 7 times. Reusable bags made from recycled plastic, you have to reuse them 26 times. Plus, most are imported from China and some have been found to contain lead. Cotton bags are way up there to 327 times. The sad irony in all this is that plastic grocery bags are probably one of the most reused items that we bring into our homes, yet those are the ones that they target to ban. Now, just because you don't directly put your bag into a bin labeled recycle doesn't mean you're not recycling it. Backers of bag bans continuously label the bags single-use bags. But how many of them are really single-use? These bags are purposely made as thinly as possible to carry the amount of load required. They weigh only about 1/4 of an ounce each. More plastic is put into these bags when shopping than the bags weigh, and that plastic is truly single-use plastic. Paper and reusable bags take more energy to create, ship, and stock than plastic bags. And don't forget you have to wash and dry the reusable bags. According to Environmental Resources Planning, a professional firm that conducts litter studies, plastic retail bags typically represent less than 1% of litter and 0.3% of waste collected in the United States. So the environmental benefits of banning them will be negligible. I must remind you that no businesses here is forced to offer plastic bags, and no customers are forced to take plastic bags. If people agreed with bag bans, then bag bans would not be needed. The proposal rule is at least 5 cents per bag, with low-income people being exempt. First, I believe this is illegal price fixing on a product. Second, about 20% of Port Angeles will be exempt from the rule. If the law is just and righteous, then all must abide by it, including the 20%. And why not let the public vote on this referendum? If the proponents of the bag bans cannot get their message out to persuade the populace, then that is their problem. They should not do an easy end-run fiat and enforce their virtue signaling lifestyle on everyone else. I must remind you, City Council members, you are our neighbors, not kings and queens set up to regulate by decree what a private business or citizen must or must not do. It is not to illegally engage in price fixing or to decide who will or will not be exempt from the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person to speak will be Michelle Skelton. Sorry, sometimes it's hard to read these things.
Hi, my name is Michelle Skelton. I reside at 3528 Canyon Edge Drive in Port Angeles. And I guess first I just wanted to say, just in response to the previous speaker, I think most of us that are in favor of getting rid of plastic bags know that for reusable bags to really be worth their weight, we do need to reuse them many times. I can say I've had the same set for over a decade and have easily used them hundreds of times each. So I don't see that as any particular part of the problem there. What I really wanted to do today was just to very briefly throw my support behind the third version of the ordinance. As a member of the Plastic Reduction Coalition, we've talked about the different versions and find that this one's probably the easiest to read and most clear overall out of all of them. So that would be my suggestion out of all of them. I did take a brief look at it as an English teacher and just had a couple quick little edits. Actually, overall, pretty good. And the second whereas on the very first page, there's just a minor change. The word incentives is used there, but we either need to add a couple words there to make that make sense, or to actually change that from a noun to a verb, which would be the very awkward verb incentivizes. So probably just rephrase that sentence would be the better option there. The only other thing I would suggest is more of a clarification under 5.95.030, compostable plastic bags provided in store or at checkout. Item B discusses the green or brown plastic bags and that they should only be used for bags that are compostable. I think maybe we need just a little more clarification there that those colors should only be used for bags that are compostable and shouldn't be used for anything else. It's kind of have to read between the lines there, but I know that was the intention of having that stipulation in there, so I think maybe just a little more clarification on that. and that would, I think, be useful down the line. I know one of my other coalition members, I'm not sure if she's going to speak tonight or not, but had emailed a member of the council as well, maybe looking for a little more clarification. Under retail bag requirements, item B, to add back in a little bit more language about single-use bags, and to also add back into this ordinance the idea to extend this ordinance to city-sponsored events. So I would also support that. And I would just in general like to thank the council and everybody here for all the time that everybody has put into this. This has been pretty amazing to see the time and effort that folks have put into it, both the council and the public, so I appreciate that. And I just want to say that those of us on the coalition, I know many of us plan to go beyond this and continue educating and continue to do similar actions to reduce plastic use and pollution. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Sandy Royalty.
Hi, I'm Sandy Royalty, 526 East 11th Street in Port Angeles. And I have one comment to say that I'm very, very glad to know that the bridge barriers are going up. It's a huge relief. And happy that that all came to pass. And then something else I have a question about is whether the barriers were addressed for when they redo the bridge on the over the Elroy River. That I'm not sure about. I kind of looked in the paper for it and didn't find it.
And I'm sorry, right now this is the public hearing on the plastic bags.
Yeah, well, I can't stay. So anyway, but my comment on the plastic bags is that I wasn't sure how you guys were going to handle the fact that where does the money go when people pay for a bag? I have another life in California. I own a house there. And in my area, and up in Santa Cruz too, the plastic bags have been banned for a long time. You have to buy them in the store if you want them. And the thing is, it's kind of turned into a racket in some instances where, like, some of the stores will charge whatever they want for any bag. And that being said, it's good that people are buying plastic sometimes, or paper. And the question is, does the money go to the merchant? And is there any way that the money that you pay for the plastic bag or paper bag, if you have to buy one, I have reusable bags too, but every once in a while, is there any way that that can go into a fund for some kind of environmental cleanup? Has anybody ever explored that? Because otherwise it really becomes sort of like raising grocery prices and prices of goods because you have to pay for the bags if you need it for a particular item. And it would be nice if that went somewhere for the good of the cleanup. That's, yeah, I just wondered, because this is, down there, it's already a done deal. And I'm just throwing it out there. And also, it might be something that could be put to the voters if the decision doesn't get made tonight or whatever. It would be something that's been on the ballot for some communities. And I wouldn't mind. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Robbie Hodges.
Robbie Bantus, 2238 East Lindbergh Road, Port Angeles. I'm here because I want to support the work of the council members and so many other people, individuals and staff members who are giving their time and have researched this so thoroughly to deal with this problem. And I feel like this is one of the most encouraging actions and indications of what I call a holistic approach toward the well-being of the community that I've seen in the nearly 47 years I've been here. I mean, there have been lots of good things, but this is really exceptional. I have been observing what other governmental entities here are doing and other groups working together particularly, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I think just one example is the way the city police are working with the homeless situation. And this is, in some ways, this is related because the plastic bags that disturb me and my husband particularly are the ones that we see in the streams and alongside our wonderful coastline, which we know are going to get into marine life and cause more problems. We ourselves have hauled out some 40 big trash bags off the property that we have preserved with the North Atlantic Land Trust to try to protect just one stream. So it's a it's a huge problem, and they're not all plastic bags, but that's certainly a lot of them. I wrote a letter to the editor suggesting that this could just be a start, but I certainly think we ought to move ahead with this good start now and then look at some other possibilities down the line. You know, there might be some way to have a fund that would contribute toward cleaning up the litter, or more volunteers who would take on different neighborhoods to try to keep things clean. Because I just had this feeling that this is such an exceptional place that we ought to be a model, you know, where people would say, Port Angeles, oh yeah, that's that place, where they're doing everything they can to protect the beauty and protect and be responsible about use of materials and trying to save our salmon and other wildlife. So I hope we can just be at a wonderful level there, and I appreciate what you're doing there to make this possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last person who's going to Jane Renner.
My name is Jane Vanderhoof. I live at 114 West 2nd Street in Port Angeles, and I spoke to this issue at the first hearing about how I was kind of trained in Long Beach, California to use cloth bags because they had a rule that you couldn't, I don't even think they sold the plastic ones, I think they just sold the paper ones. And I'm against having any of the plastic bags, and I'm also against having the low-income people get to buy, not have to pay for a plastic bag. First, I don't think we should have any plastic bags, and I think we should, just an education point of view, if a lot of them are homeless people anyway, I'd rather see a cotton bag left out in the woods than a plastic bag left out in the woods, and I'm sure there's some way of getting the senior center or somebody to make bags. So, I think that's all I had to say about all that. But I'm for a pretty strict ban on plastic. I own a farm in Joyce, and it's organic, and I feel like we're fighting an uphill battle with overpopulation and overuse of resources on the planet. And I think with tourists coming here, we try to promote this area. I'm kind of against tourism myself, but anyway, I guess the community isn't, so, which is fine, it's a beautiful place. But yeah, as Robbie Manchud said, I think we should be a model and say, hey, we're pretty green around here, we want to promote this, even though it's really just a drop in the bucket about what's happening in the big garbage pack in the Pacific Ocean between Hawaii and the Pacific coast here of California, and it's like, now it's twice as big as Texas. And I'm sure there's a lot more in it than just single-use plastic bags, but at least it's a start.
Thank you. Anybody else out there who would like to speak to this issue, the plastic bag ordinance, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jess Haugen, and I live in Squim, 664 Macomb Road, and I'm here to support the Renewable Bag Initiative. My family was here as well, and I think my youngest 6-year-old wanted to say what we do in our homes affects what happens in the homes of animals and fish.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ned Hammer, 1228 West 12th Street here in Port Angeles. I'm also here to support the recyclable or the reusable bag initiative. And I just want to really acknowledge the eloquence of the speakers before me, including the very first young lady who went, who was 10 years old and spoke about the fish and the wildlife. And I also want to recognize and acknowledge the second speaker, whose name I don't know, but for highlighting that this is not a simple issue, it's a complex and multifaceted issue, and that this is a small drop in the bucket in terms of the total volume of plastic that's out there. On bulk, I think that this is a time when the symbolic action carries greater weight than the weight of the added plastic bags, and that by taking that first step, that as a place where we are neighbors and community members, and we want to take care of and support our homeless and our lower income families, as well as welcome our tourists. I also wouldn't mind being there if you're on the road sometimes, but to make this a welcoming place that is kind of held up as a way that we can take steps in this direction. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else who would like to speak about this item out there? Last chance. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sophia Gu, and I live at 903 South Albert Street. So first I wanted to also add my support for the version 3 of the ordinance, which I think has much clearer common sense language for people to follow, and also takes care of not having a whole list of definitions at the very front that can be confusing for people. And then I wanted to kind of remind council that the plastic bag issue has been kind of on the table for the last 5 months. It first came up in early November. And since then, a number of people have spoken about their views on the plastic bags. And if you go back into all of the council minutes, you'll find that actually 80% of the people who have spoken at this podium are in favor of the ordinance. So I hope that the council recognizes that there is wide community support for this ordinance and makes a decisive vote today for our environment and for our future generations. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, folks, last call. Okay, I guess this closes that public hearing on the bag issue. Council, is there any comments, issues, anything you would like to discuss?
I just wanted to say a couple of things that just keep rolling around in my mind in terms of moving forward with a push to encourage people to establish the pattern of people bringing their own bags is the statistic about the current trend that we're on, and it's been acknowledged that single-use plastic bags are a small drop in the bucket, but if by 2050 there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean, and we're a community that relies on fishing as a part of why people are here and why people come here, I think that's something we really need to consider. What can we do rather than, well, we can't really affect it, so we shouldn't. I think we should take a proactive approach. The other thing that's really concerning to me is the fact that both in Oregon and greater Seattle area right now, recycling companies are trying to figure out what to do with not plastic at this point, but a number of items that China is no longer taking for recycling. And so I think it's imperative that we start looking at reduction rather than recycling, because we're running into problems with recycling. So I'm in favor of, I like version C, and I'm in favor of that primarily for those 2 reasons today.
Anybody else in the council who would like to speak on this?
I also like version C. I'd like to just kind of address a few things, I guess. I'll point out, I thought, a citizen had a good point about the referendum process, and this ordinance is, let's see what it says. Yeah, it is subject to referendum. So if the citizens decide we've done a bad job, there, it is subject to referendum. So, and like I said, citizens want to correct us on this, we are willing to listen. When someone else brought up city-sponsored events, and I personally appreciate the concern, and I don't disagree. One of the things that I was kind of mulling over is I like to focus on the harm, and I think that that's a really minor part of the harm. We're not dispensing copious amounts of plastic bags at city-sponsored events, and a lot of people that are using city facilities for these kind of events are nonprofits and charities, and I want to burden them the least. So I don't necessarily support expanding version C to city-sponsored events. I think that was a reasonable exception that when Lindsay drafted it, used. So the one amendment that I would like us to consider on version C is on the effective date. As written, it's subject to referendum, which shall go into effect 30 days from the date of enactment. And I would like to suggest that we amend that to 90 days. That gives retailers ample time to work through existing stock, to figure out order management, whatever decisions they might have to make, and what they're going to be stocking. That gives them a lot of time for compliance. A lot of times when we think about these issues, we think about the big retailers, and the big retailers are going to have managers that have gone through this in other jurisdictions, and they're going to be, it's not going to be difficult for them to comply. We also have some small retailers in town. I want to be considerate to them. They don't necessarily have a huge management tree that can make these decisions for them. In some cases, it's going to be the owner, who is the only person that really is in the management tree. So I would like, that would be my one suggestion, to give them a little extra time so that we can kind of have that ease in.
Anybody else would like to speak on this?
So I am in favor of version B simply because it doesn't have pass-through costs of the paper bag. And other than that, I like version C because it doesn't have all the redundant definitions on the front of it. I would be in favor of the 90 days, although I had a comical conversation at Walgreens yesterday. I asked him how the plastic bags were going to affect him, and he sat there staring at me for a minute, and he says, well, we're going to send all the plastic bags back, we're going to tell corporate we need paper, and that's it. Okay? Because, again, this is happening in other areas. This is not, I realize that I would like to see 90 days because there are small retailers in the area, but as far as the big retailers, this is not their first time doing this. They're not going to be scrambling to figure out, oh my God, what are we going to do? So I'm not in favor of the 5 cents, which is why I am in favor of version B, but I like the wording on version C. Sorry, Lindsay, you're not going to take that out of there, but.
All right, anybody else would like to speak on this one? Councilwoman?
Okay, someone told me, I'm drawing a blank on our downtown grocery store down at Country, yeah, I was in Country Air the other day. And in Country Air, in January, they discontinued the use of plastic bags. I brought my items to the counter, and they said if they have a little sign that if you'd like a paper bag, it's 15 cents. So what they've done is they've come up with a policy that works for them without being threatened, without being penalized, without any bans. Everybody in this room wants the same outcome. We want a cleaner city, we want clean waters. We all are in agreement. My concern is how we get there. And I'm sorry that we're not asking for cooperation and collaboration with the community rather than going to ban fees, penalties, fines. I don't, that's not my preferred way to make positive change. On version C, I just want to mention one thing. So on the second whereas, where I noticed that, but the speaker brought it up, whereas requiring a minimal fee for carry-out bags, maybe you can insert the word as incentives for customers, and then add for customers to bring their own bags, but that's an incomplete sentence. But when we get down to retail bag requirements, retailers shall charge customers at least 5 cents. Well, Country Air charges 15 cents because they've all obviously costed out what works for their business, and that works for their business. So I just don't think the job of the city council to tell businesses how to run their business. I know as customers request things, businesses change, and I've been paying a lot of attention to plastic bags lately. So the bag you get at Safeway, gosh, how long have they had? I haven't been reading the bags I get at Safeway until just recently. But it says, reuse and recycle, help protect our environment. Please bring this bag to your local Safeway for recycling. I know they've been recycling. They recycle thousands of bags that go to the food bank. But they take them back, and then a Rite Aid. I haven't been reading my Rite Aid bags. Have you guys? Rite Aid too, it says, please return to participating store for recycling. They get it. They've been trying to be responsible, and they recycle. But I agree that if there's a time limit, 30 days, I don't believe is reasonable. So if we have a local Rite Aid store, or Safeway store, or Walgreens, they don't make the decisions on this. They have to tell corporate what's happening. Corporate has to discuss it and have meetings, and everything comes down, but it's a cost. It's a cost. It's an inventory issue, and also it's a software issue. At the checkout, now the cashiers have to have an additional item on checkout. Well, that gets into software issues, and that gets into costs, and I don't think 30 days is reasonable. So I'm hoping that if you consider a ban, that you will at least give them 90 days. Because where did the 30 days come from? How is that relevant to any business? I don't know where the 30 days came from. I don't think it's reasonable. So, but now in version C, I noticed the author, under penalties, the author omitted 3 words that he has brought up every single meeting. Under penalties, I don't see kindly and gently. He has talked about administering them kindly and gently. Is there such a thing for penalties? Do we want to tell our retailers, we're going to penalize you $250 each day of violation? I don't want to do that to my businesses. We've worked so hard to develop, Mr. West is the Director of Economic Development. We worked so hard for economic development in this town, and I don't think penalizing and fines for threatening our businesses is the direction that enhances our partnership with our businesses. So I'm not in favor of that. I wish we could work together because we really don't know the time and the cost to each business that we are requiring them to do. And also, one of my esteemed colleagues here in the council at our last meeting mentioned that, we just have too many regulations. This is my 3rd term on the city council, and I've come to realize we just have too many regulations. I agree. So I don't want to use the powers of regulation to constrain the decisions of private business in Port Angeles in order to move into the direction that government wants. Public pressure. If we don't want plastic bags, public pressure will stop this. But I think if we're not giving the community an opportunity to voluntarily come up with creative ideas how we can switch from this and voluntarily do it without the penalties. I consider this a bag cost is a grocery tax. The people, I've always been an advocate for the elderly, and I think this hits the people who can afford it least. The lower income people, well, when you go and buy your groceries, you normally need multiple bags, so there'll be multiple costs. That's tantamount to, a fee is a tax, it's tantamount to a grocery tax. I prefer not doing that. Our family and our business recycles and reuses 100% of ours, and we use this for garbage that goes in the landfill. I keep them in my car. Some states you're required to keep them in the car for your trash, so you don't throw things out the window of your car. You're supposed to use plastic bags for trash. I keep, even to the embarrassment of my husband, I keep small and large plastic bags in the trunk of my car because I'm always stopping, picking up trash. And I encourage people to take a plastic bag on your walk and pick up PA. It's my slogan, pick up garbage when you walk around. Let's keep the place clean. So I'm with you. I want a clean town. But I don't want to threaten you with penalties. I don't want to threaten businesses with penalties. I don't want to give you an additional grocery tax. I feel that together as a community we can solve this, together we can work this, and if we don't want them, the stores will voluntarily discontinue them. So I thank you for really, we're all concerned about cleaning up our community, and I hope we all continue to pick up PA, but without the penalties and fines. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilmember Meyer.
You'll have to forgive me, I've been accused many times of not being the brightest bulb in the lamp, and so I'm trying to just get a handle or grasp on what we're trying to accomplish here tonight. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to, because I need visual and training aids and all kinds of crutches to kind of see what we're doing, I've brought along a few items for me to just kind of figure out what we're attempting to do here. So if you don't mind, by the way, I brought my materials in a reusable bag, by the way. But unlike 97% of the people that use this, I cleaned it first. So anyway, this is apparently the heinous plastic bag that we are attempting to ban tonight. And again, it's a plastic bag, and that's the big bone of contention. I pulled this out of one of my drawers today. This is also a plastic bag. And I would hazard a guess there's more plastic in this bag than there is in this one. But this one is an exemption, it's exempted under the ordinance. So we have a bag here that's considerably larger than the one that we're attempting to ban, but it's exempted. Let's see what else do I have in here. Oh yeah. Have you seen these things? These are plastic gallon storage bags, and let's see. Plastic storage bags, and one other thing I had in here, okay. These things, along with plastic sandwich bags, I would hazard to guess that people use and throw away these things more in a week than they do throw away and dispose of the plastic bags, but the takeout bags in the grocery stores. But again, this is exempted. We're not banning these things here. So let me put this up here so I don't forget it. Oh yeah, have you seen this? This is the little ubiquitous bag that we get our lovely newspaper in, our informative PDN. This comes every day, except Saturday. I don't get it on Saturday, do you guys? Saturday. Okay, so we get this ubiquitous little plastic bag every day, and we throw it away every day. Nobody I've talked to reuses this for anything. So we throw this PDN bag, hopefully not with the PDN in it, away every day except Saturday. So, and I understand that this is a little bit harder to process because it's actually even thinner than the disposable, or I'm sorry, the reusable, or the bag that we're attempting to ban here tonight. So, this one, anybody know what this one is? This is the sanitary bag that you put your groceries, or your fresh produce in, or your meats, you wrap your meats in. Okay, this bag here, we get this, again, to put our, it's a sanitary bag to put our fresh produce and meats in. Under the ordinance number 3 that Councilmember Strobel-Warren wrote, we would actually have to pay for this bag. Under the other two versions of this, this would be exempted. So we have another exemption here. We also have, as was stated, exemptions for low-income people, people that are on food stamps. We also have exemptions for nonprofit organizations, and if none of these else apply, you can go down to City Hall and get a special exemption. I'm sure the city manager would love to entertain your application for exemptions. Anybody see this laying around? This doesn't fall under the exemption list, and the reason being is it's not even discussed in the ordinance. So I've seen more of these laying around the Port Angeles area than many more of these laying around the Port Angeles area than I have seen of these shopping bags. How about these things? Have you seen these things laying around? Plastic cups. Oh, and here's one of my favorites. Straws with the plastic caps on them. You see these laying around? By the way, not even addressed or talked about in our ordinance whatsoever. So there's no exemption needed because it's not even talked about. Here's one of my favorite things. Anybody know what this is? This is that those plastic rings that go around your soda bottles or your sports drinks or whatever. Okay. I'm sure you've seen the terrible pictures of animals ensnared in these things. And if you haven't, I'm sure Lindsay or some other person can show you the pictures of these things. Not even talked about, not even addressed in our ordinance. No mentions whatsoever. Okay? And then, here's what bothers me the most about all of this. We've been deliberating, debating, talking about many things in our environment, but not once has this come up. You know what this is? This is discarded nylon fishing and gill netting material. You know how long it takes this to degrade? Trick question. It doesn't. It continues to kill long after. This is responsible for killing more sea life than any of this stuff put together. Now, I understand the need for cleaning up the environment and decreasing the amount of plastic pollution in our environment. I get that. The argument then becomes, well, we have to start somewhere. Well, if we have to start somewhere, why wouldn't we want to start with one of the most dangerous, most insidious, most profuse materials rather than this innocuous shopping bag? To me, doing that is just disingenuous. Actually, it's even borderline dishonest, in my opinion. The second thing that bothers me about this is I've read several studies where in places where this ordinance was enacted, merchants experienced a decrease in sales. Why? People just didn't want to fuss with this. They just decided to go shop outside of the city limits. And I've had many constituents contact me, and by the way, I think the 80% is a misnomer, because if I did my own personal survey, the numbers would be reversed on contacting me about this ordinance. But many of my constituents have contacted me and said that's exactly what, if this ordinance is passed, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to go shop outside the city limits. Now, the decrease in sales that was experienced ranged anywhere from 10 for 25%, 25% being on a high end. And so, based on figures that were provided to me by our finance department, thank you, Tess, in 2017, the city collected $3.4 million in sales tax, $3.4 million. Just a modest 10% decline in that figure would represent a $300,000 hit to our budget. That's on top of the $400,000 hit we took the year before based on the closing of the mill. Now, if you think throwing a $300,000 monkey wrench into the gears of our budget, a budget that's already tighter than a gnat's butt stretched over a rain barrel, if you think that's sound financial management, I don't. So, the bottom line is we can't afford to do this right now, folks. We just don't have the money to do this. Maybe in a couple of years we can reconsider it when the mill's back and our cash flow is better. We can look at this. But you need to tell me what services to cut, what staff positions to eliminate to pay for this. So I just want to summarize this way. We have an ordinance that we're considering that comes nowhere close to addressing the real problem that we're facing. And in addition to having all these inane exceptions, I mean, when is a law not a law? And on top of that, this ordinance, in my opinion, would be a financial mistake for Port Angeles. So based on those two considerations, I'm not in favor of any of these versions of the ordinance.
Well, we've known that Councilmember Moran and Councilmember Pitt have been opposed to this, so thank you for your comments. I'm going to try to address as much as seems relevant and then make a motion for adoption of one of these with some amendments as has been suggested. So in Washington, D.C., they analyzed their 2009 bag law a few years after it went into effect. And they found that 83% of residents, this is surveying about 600 people, and 90% of businesses either support or are indifferent to the bag law, while only 16% of residents and 8% of businesses feel bothered by the law. It sounds like in terms of the people who've spoken publicly here, it's a similar amount. So thanks, Sophia, for doing that little study. In terms of recycling statistics, my understanding is about 0.3 to 0.5% of plastic bags actually get recycled. So like that facility at Safeway, it's a very small number of people who actually use that. And I appreciate that, and that's valuable. But the larger effect, and this is what I understand from the folks at Solid Waste Advisory Committee, is how much the recycling facilities get bogged down with these plastic bags. So it's not so much that the greenhouse gas emission is less, it's that the shape of the bag is a real problem in recycling facilities. It's also a real problem in the marine environment. So yes, by mass, by volume, well, by mass specifically, this isn't that big of a deal. But based on its shape and based on how it behaves in recycling and in the ocean, it is a big deal. So in terms of Councilmember Skate, kindly and gently, I think the term would be prosecutorial discretion. That yes, the ordinance has teeth to it, but we can choose not to use those teeth. And that's something that we as a city choose to do. And if we look at how the city's laws work, usually we make sure that we have a remedy with the law. In terms of, well, what does this do? This is incentivizing a clean environment here in Port Angeles. So if we're really against regulation, I'll give an example. Let's get rid of the lodging tax. It's a regulation, it's a tax. But we've seen, as council members, the benefit of the lodging tax because it allows us as a city to pull resources together in order to provide capital projects, events, and other things that have helped to grow the tourism business here in Port Angeles. So that's a great example. Okay, let's get rid of the lodging tax. Do we really not want that? It's something that I know we all see the value of, and really government can play a very vital role in helping to incentivize the kind of environment that we want to live in. So the word "only" in that one provision, I'm with you. I struggled on where to put that, and it might not be the right spot. So that's something to figure out. But it works where it's at, and it might be better somewhere else, but I think we can move on with it. The produce bags, Councilmember Moran, I think that this does not, as you said, charge a 5-cent fee for the produce bags. It's in the first section there that it applies at checkout. So
We take those through checkout.
provided at checkout. So it says 5.95.020 subsection A. Retailers shall charge customers at least 5 cents for each bag provided at checkout or home delivery of goods, which shall be noted on the customer's receipt. So as far as I read it, and I don't see that produce bag applying. So funds from the bag fee, there's a question of, well, why not pull these funds together for like a clean environment fund? One of the reasons for not doing that is that an argument that the plastics industry has used against these has been that they become a tax. And when the government then collects that money, like we do for the lodging tax, collects that money and then uses it for a larger good that can only be accomplished when that money is pulled together, then it's arguably a tax, and that's a way for the plastics industry to go after these sorts of laws. So, we could explore that further in Washington and why that applies in Washington. And if people want to explore that, I'd suggest looking at the article by Hugh Spitzer, Home Rule versus Dillon's Rule for Washington cities, which gets into what the scope of our taxing authority is. But otherwise, I'm basically relying on an article by Jeannie Romer, who's an attorney who advised New York City on their on their fee. And her article is called Why Carry-Out Bag Fees Are More Effective Than Plastic Bag Bans. In terms of the low-income exemption, I think it's an administrative issue for the most part. It's not that people shouldn't be incentivized to do the right thing in regard to the bags that they bring. But if you're going to the store and you're buying everything with an EBT card, and then you have to get out 5 cents or 10 cents, you're making a transaction with the EBT card. You shouldn't have to then have to make a transaction with cash, which maybe you even just brought your EBT card and you didn't bring the rest of your wallet or something like that. So I think administratively, it makes sense to just have it not apply for folks who are paying with an EBT card, which I think is the main way that people pay with state or federal low-income food benefits. This is, as I think Councilmember French mentioned, within the power of the people's referendum power. And so I think the direct democracy of the people is a very important aspect of government, especially in Western states like Washington. And so if people feel strongly about this, then use the referendum power that we have as a city. The city facilities provision, it's important to me that the city is a leader in this, and I'd like to see us explore, how are thin film, non-compostable plastic bags used at events, a lot of events probably at Burton or provided by the city itself, and would we be complying with this if it applied to us? And let's revisit that at some point. But for now, I think we should move forward. So this time next year, I'd like to see an analysis of the reasons why that businesses apply for exemptions, so that we can see what works and what doesn't work with this. And then also, we should explore specific issues around plastic pollution generated by restaurants and other aspects that I think Councilmember Moran aptly pointed out are major issues for pollution locally. And really, I think for folks here and for folks who've advocated for this issue with the city, your work's just begun, right? Is to help people understand what works, what doesn't work here in the city, assuming that this passes, and figure out how to make this work, not just here, but potentially Clallam County, because as folks have mentioned, we face a trickle-over effect with one Safeway being out of town, with Walmart being out of town, that there are a number of grocers who are not subject to this law if it goes into effect today. And then I think, in the big picture too, folks mentioned the issues around homelessness and bags and pollution and damage to creek valleys, et cetera. And we desperately need, as a council, as a community, as city staff, to work on issues around affordable housing and homelessness. So that's where I hope we direct some of our energy after getting this done today. So, in the spirit of getting it done today, I move to adopt an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, encouraging conservation and reuse by requiring a minimum fee for carryout bags, prohibiting thin-film non-compostable plastic bags, and setting minimum requirements for compostable plastic bags and paper bags. Version C, with the following amendments. The second whereas clause is changed to requiring a minimal fee for carryout bags as incentive for customers to bring their own bags, and allows the retailer to not count the carryout bags as overhead. And with the amendment in section 4, effective date, that this ordinance is subject to referendum and shall go into effect 90 days from the date of enactment, rather than 30 days from the date of enactment.
All
Second.
right, we've got a motion on the floor and a second. Any more discussion?
I just want to say in response to Councilmember Moran's demonstration, I would happily consider in the future adding all of those things to a conversation about reduction in our plastic use in our community. Straws and water bottles are definitely one of my big things. In fact, last night we admittedly went to a drive-through and I realized since I was taking the food home, we didn't need straws, and I walked in the door and I pulled the stainless steel straws out and my son said, "That's a great idea." So at least they're starting to get the bigger picture, the kids are. So we can, I'm happy to entertain that conversation.
Make it clear in the beginning, I am in favor of the bag ban. I am not in favor of the 5-cent charge, so I will not be supporting that version.
We're in a difficult position financially. The mill is on a hiatus, and next year's budget has been, this year's budget, next year's budget has been so finely tuned. We needed extra money for the fencing, refencing of the 8th Street bridges, and staff's been pulling it from everywhere. But the budget is so balanced and we don't have any extra wiggle room. And people who've told me that they resent the ban and the fees and the penalties are going to vote with their feet and shop outside the city bothers me. I don't want to lose any business in the city. Because our budget is our lifeline for everything we can do for our community. I hope that after this is enacted, we can get monthly updates on our sales tax. I would hate for the sales tax revenue to decline, because that would mean our services would have to decline. So I'm concerned about our financial position. We have a new grocery store coming in, and this is not really good timing to welcome a new grocery store because of all the financial changes and adjustments they'll have to make at the last minute. So I wish we would educate, not legislate, and I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Anybody else who would like to speak?
I've already spoken, so.
Anybody else? Both spoken, so go ahead and start.
I just want to say that I'm not disbelieving that people will leave town, that people have said that. But I also question why you would spend more than 5 or 10 cents in gas to drive to a store outside of town to avoid paying for a bag. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and that could be a real good education piece on our side of things, so that we don't see reduction. I also think we have a lot of people who come into our community, and whether we rely solely on tourism or not, it certainly is a large part of our the income in our community, particularly in the summer. And I know from people I have talked to that they're surprised that we still have plastic bags. And so I think, it's all a balance, but particularly driving out of town to save on a plastic, on a paper bag doesn't make a lot of sense to me when gas is as expensive as it is.
Councilmember Meredith?
I agree with Kate on that point. Also, you can't track sales tax based on a plastic bag ban. Riddell's does not put a car in a plastic bag. There are thousands and thousands of items people buy every day that do not go in a plastic bag. Lumber doesn't go in a plastic bag. So to compare sales tax, I'm not sure what we're comparing, unless those stores are willing to give up the sales tax amount for stuff that would normally be placed in a plastic bag. And if you think that this ordinance is putting a strain on them, I can only imagine what their accounting department would think.
So I'd like to speak to a couple of things, because I think there's some misunderstandings as to if you are low income, that you're going to get a plastic bag. If you're low income, you're going to get a paper bag, and you're not going to be getting a plastic bag. So no, that's, the plastic bags are gone. The other thing is the issue with, Country Air, they're charging 15 cents. A retailer can charge, right now we're saying they must charge at least 5 cents. And that's just to change behavior. It was spoken to that we don't like to pay fees. Well, we can avoid that by bringing our own bags. So you don't have to pay anything. You really just bring your own bags and do not pay 5 cents. So that's another thing that I want you guys to keep in mind on that. Councilmember Moran brought a couple of points as to the build-out material. We are grateful that we have a marine resource committee that's actually looking into getting a lot of these things out of our waters. The old crab pots are now found getting out. They are looking into potentially getting some of those nets out because they are very dangerous to our community. So it is in the works in different places. So at least as a community, we're starting to try to address some of that. I totally disagree that this ban is disingenuous and dishonest. I really don't like that language when it comes to this ban, because we are really trying to move forward with that. And the items that you have pointed out are very good items as to what we could address in the future. So I appreciate you bringing that in there, but I do not believe that this ban is disingenuous or dishonest. I really think it's a beginning step, and we can continue to add things to it, and we can continue to move forward as the community feels it's really important to do so. So, with that being spoken, go ahead.
So just to speak a little bit to this issue of plastic bag bans, none of the 3 options on the table, well, 4 options if we consider no action to be an option, none of them are plastic bag bans. The first 2 contain a loophole, which is that they ban plastic bags that are less than 2.25 mils thick. And so in those kind of first generation bag bans, some retailers would just stick in the bags that they supply and just provide the same bags at checkout. So that's the issue with option B, is that a retailer who said, well, I'm not going to charge my customers a fee. Well, I'm just going to make my bags somewhat thicker. They then qualify as reusable, and there they are, plastic bags at checkout. And so people have told me, yeah, I go to this town and they say they have a bag law, but yet it looks like it's not in effect. Well, they're probably using that loophole in the first generation ordinances. So with version C that's on the table, that's why it's more the bag fee hybrid, where it's banning the thin film non-compostable plastic bags, the ones that clog up the recycling plants, the ones that are kind of the main problem in the marine environment, but it's charging a fee for everyone else. So a retailer who says, I'm just going to continue to stock thick plastic bags, they can continue to do that. There's no requirement that they move to a paper bag. There's no requirement that they carry durable bags. There's just a requirement that they charge a minimum 5-cent fee, and that they don't stock the thin film non-compostable plastic bags, and that there's some requirements for what compostable bags look like, or what post-consumer waste content in paper bags look like. But none of the options on the table have been you will not see plastic bags in the grocery store. I just want to be clear about that.
All right, folks, we've had a lot of discussion. We have a motion on the table and a second. So let's get on with it. So all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no.
No.
All right, so it looks like we have a 4-3 on the vote for the ordinance. Do you need any more clarification on that? No? Okay. All right, so it looks like the plastic ban has passed. All right, folks, now the next item, hopefully you will stick around, right, because it should be a very interesting presentation, the Urban and Community Forestry by Ben Thompson from the DNR.
Thank you for your feedback, Ben.
Oh, absolutely. It's part of the job.
Ours too.
Let's see, I think someone needs to unlock the computer. Let's see, while it's warming up here, I'll just get started with my introduction. My name is Ben Thompson. I work for the Washington State Department of Natural Resources in the Urban and Community Forestry Program. My agency is perhaps best known for the work they do in the uplands and the wildlands regarding timber management and wildfire suppression, but the trees in our cities and towns are also natural resources, and that's why I have a job at DNR, and that's what brings me here today. Because this is really, urban and community forestry is really about natural resource management. I have a lot of information to cover in a short period of time, so I'm going to go pretty quickly, and we can entertain questions at the end. Happy to do that. So a little bit about our program. We are a non-regulatory program. We are primarily funded with pass-through grant funds from the United States Forest Service. We have support from the Washington Community Forestry Council, of which local arborist John Bornsworth here is a member. And our program exists to provide technical, financial, and educational assistance, primarily to municipalities, but also others in the state of Washington. And Port Angeles has taken advantage of our program services several times in years past, and we hope that that relationship continues. So one of the things that I think is paramount to managing trees in cities is that cities have a legacy of managing streets and sewer and water lines and other built infrastructure and other built assets. We don't necessarily have a legacy of managing trees as intentionally or as specifically as we do that built infrastructure. But I think that we need to look at our trees, whether they're on lining city streets or in city parks or in natural areas that are on public property. I think we have to be looking at that also as a component of our infrastructure. And unlike the built infrastructure, as soon as you build a new sidewalk or a new street, its highest value is right when construction is complete, and it degrades in value after that. Whereas trees, if they're maintained and well cared for, they grow in size, and as they mature, they add value. The other thing about trees as a component of infrastructure is that the street, or the built infrastructure, does one job at a time. The street allows us to get from one place to another. A street light provides illumination at night. The sewer line takes the sewage and takes it to the treatment plant. But trees, on the other hand, are doing many jobs for us all at once. So they're providing shade, they're helping us conserve energy, they're providing wildlife habitat, they're sequestering carbon, they're intercepting and mitigating stormwater, they're scrubbing pollutants from the air, scrubbing pollutants from that stormwater as well. They're buffering noise, keeping winds down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So relative to the cost of your built infrastructure, the cost of planting and caring for trees is relatively low given the payback. So if we're thinking about trees as infrastructure, then we need to think about them as assets. So one of the things that cities do, even if you don't have a legacy of specifically maintaining street trees or park trees or natural areas,
is that you do have a history of asset management to some degree. So asset management is where we're trying to maximize the benefits and services of the asset. We're trying to reduce any risks that are associated with the asset, and we're trying to control the costs that are associated with managing that asset, right? And the way that we do that is through best practices, and I'll get into some of that a little bit later. So this is where we find the urban forest. We find it in parks, we find it in street trees, natural areas, other public properties like schools, but primarily the urban forest is on private property. So generally speaking, it's different in every community, but the public land that has trees on it is roughly 10 to 15%, or I should say public land is 10 to 15% of the city's overall land area, generally speaking. And these are the tools that are primarily used for communities to manage their trees. You have a professional staffing component. So can you imagine trying to keep your streets maintained or engage in these major infrastructure projects without employing a city engineer on staff? It's unthinkable that we would be able to do those things without that expertise on staff. So if we're looking at trees as an asset that requires management and care, we should also be thinking about having the staff on board that has the expertise to manage that asset. Policies and ordinances, as you know from the ordinance discussion we just had, is a way to sort of incentivize a set of behaviors towards a preferred outcome, and there are certainly many preferred outcomes when it comes to trees. There's also strategic plans, management plans, maintenance plans, and resource assessments like canopy analysis, which Port Angeles already has. So I'm not intimately familiar with this report, but it was funded with a grant from our program in 2011. The report says that Port Angeles has a potential tree canopy of 48%, and as of 2011, the canopy analyzed in this report puts you at 27.3%. And I say that the canopy is likely lower today than it is in 2011, just based on the dynamics of how trees grow. So if you have a tree that takes, say, 60 years to reach a large, full canopy size, it's going to take that replacement tree an additional 60 years to recoup that canopy. Or if you're trying to recoup that canopy faster, you're going to have to plant a lot more replacement trees to try to recoup that lost canopy just for the loss of one large shade tree, say, for example. So why is this important? We're valuing the benefits of the tree. So the tree is providing the benefits and services, so to speak, that the tree is providing. We call it ecosystem services. So these are things that if the tree wasn't doing it for us, it would cost us some type of revenue or money to do for ourselves. So some examples of that are mitigating stormwater runoff and protecting aquatic habitats. So this is an extreme example, but if you took every tree on public property, or every tree even on private property in Port Angeles, and took it out of the landscape, we would have a much, much bigger stormwater problem. That would be causing much more ecological damage and providing a lot of siltation and erosion and going up the streams and whatnot. So there is this connection between trees and stormwater runoff and aquatic habitat health in general. There's also shading and cooling and reduced energy demands and costs. This is a visual of the urban heat island effect, where you have areas outside the city or further away from downtown. Those areas tend to be more spread out, maybe more rural, have higher tree canopy. In downtown cores, even in a city like Port Angeles, you have less tree cover, more impervious cover. That's absorbing a lot of that heat and putting increased demand on the energy grid. And this was from a study in California, which I know is not here, but I think there's something to it, where they're saying that 20% shade on a street improves pavement condition by 11%, which is a 60% saving for resurfacing over 30 years. So basically, as the asphalt heats up in the sun, it expands. As the sun goes down, it contracts. The trees are providing a buffer over that expansion and contraction, which means that the asphalt is going to last longer over the period of time. And so just generally improving the comfort and appearance and appeal of your community. This is also something that everyone in this room is concerned about, and vegetation plays a key role in that. So there's also these intrinsic values, right? So what's the value of living on a tree-lined street? Or what's the value of having places to go recreate that are cool and comfortable and welcoming? What's the value of having a place that lights up in the fall? And just kind of an anecdote here, most of our native species are all yellow in fall color. So the real fall colors we're getting from the non-native species that we plant in our downtowns and shopping districts and other areas. So what do we do about this, right? What can be done? So I was challenged by Lindsay and also by Nathan to come up with some suggestions of things that can be done more creatively. So this is a list that has some low-hanging fruit, but also has some more advanced tools in it. Some of them you may already be doing, some of them may not be appropriate or feasible here, but since I'm not an expert on Port Angeles, I'm just going to present you with all of them, and you can decide for yourselves if any of these make sense to you. So the first one is designate authority, and so this is part of that intentionality. So Port Angeles has an ordinance on the books that says that I believe city manager can designate a community forester as the person that's responsible for the resource. So I don't know if that designation currently exists, but that's something that is already enabled in your ordinances. But you can also have a community tree board. And so in full honesty of the Tree City USA requirement for having a tree board, it is either or. It's having a person on staff or having a tree committee. That said, we always recommend that every community have some type of community advisory group. If you noticed before in the tools where I was talking about the resource assessment, there was also a public engagement piece to an effective urban forestry program. So the second thing is to adopt a tree ordinance. That's something that you already have on the books. And what's nice just about any ordinance on the books is that you can start small, and as needs develop or as things change, you can add to that content that's already there. So tracking your activities and costs, and this gets back to the asset management piece. If we know what we're doing and how much it's costing us, then we can make better decisions about where those financial resources are going to the resources on the ground. And then publicly recognize and celebrate the city's commitments and contributions to maintaining a healthy urban and community forest. So if you designate authority and have a community tree board, if you have that ordinance on the books, if you track your activities and costs, and if you publicly recognize and celebrate trees, then that gets you into the Tree City USA program. So, the city joined the Tree City USA program with the former employee Scott Johns kind of carrying the torch for that. Scott's no longer here, and I think that may be a factor in the city's lapsing in the Tree City USA program, but that doesn't mean that the existing staff aren't taking the issue seriously. I think it just underscores the challenge that especially a small city has to undertake so many things with limited budgets and limited staffing. Just here today, before I came up to speak, we heard everything from plastic bags to community festivals to major infrastructure projects. So this is yet another thing that falls under the city's scope of responsibility that's hard to get a handle on, especially if we don't have those people on staff and the limited financial resources. So I also encourage cities to put trees in other planning documents. So many comprehensive plans start somewhere in the beginning with a statement that says we're fortunate to live in such a wonderful, beautiful place. We're blessed with these great natural resources. And then the document from there doesn't talk about natural resources at all after that. It goes into the things that the community values. So if the community values its urban and community forest, perhaps natural resources deserve a little bit more attention in the comprehensive plan. But there may be other plans that you put together, and an emergency management plan is a good place to focus on community forestry as well, because when the wind blows or the snow flies or the rain comes or whatever it happens to be, usually trees come down in those situations, and if trees are coming down and blocking access routes for emergency response vehicles, that's a problem, right? So you can at least get a handle on our trees on those major transportation corridors. So many cities in Washington are moving to this connection between trees and stormwater by using stormwater assessment fees to help fund either fully or partially their community forestry management activities. There's a number of different cities that have taken this approach, including Vancouver and Longview and even Snoqualmie, if you're looking for another small city. Spokane is doing it. Many of the cities east of Seattle are doing it in King County as well. Specific policies, specifications, and standard operating procedures. In Port Angeles, this is what we do and how we do it. Having that information kind of lined up and ready to go to hand to whoever it may be, a developer, a resident, you'll have this information at the ready. And I think that the city does have some of this already in place. Practicing and promoting proper tree care. So there's a role of the city to sort of set the example of what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, for how trees are treated, for how areas are managed. And the standards and best practices are already out there. You just have to connect with them and plug into them, and that's another way that our program can be of assistance. So on that note, don't top trees, don't top trees, don't top trees. So, okay, I'm guessing from the reactions in the room that you're already on board with this idea, but if you're not, just Google it and you'll find plenty of information on why it's a bad idea. Because if you're trying to maximize benefits and services, control costs and reduce risks, topping does the exact opposite of all three of those things. So hiring an ISA certified arborist. ISA stands for International Society of Arboriculture. There's no licensing of tree care professionals in Washington or even many of the other Western states, but the ISA is an international nonprofit that credentials people in the tree care industry as being professional, having minimum knowledge of tree biology and physiology, best practices for the industry, as well as standards for tree worker safety. So even just a couple days of an arborist time, say every 3 to 5 years, can go a long way to helping the city really understand and better manage its resources. That's the logo right there. But you certainly don't have to hire anyone if you're willing to train or you have the capacity to train the staff that you already have. And this is, again, some place where our program can provide some assistance. And in that regard, we have a free seminar coming up. It's in Paulsbo. It's on May 9th. It's all about forest health and kind of making a connection between trees and human health as well. So anyone in this room is welcome to attend that. Just get in touch with me, and we'll get you signed up for it. So I also encourage communities to develop contracts for tree care services in advance. It's better to have that contract and not need it than to need the contract and not have it. Because when you have situations like this, where there's a tree down, it's just causing a big mess, you know, the cost for tree care services at that point is going to go up because the demand for service is going up. So have those contracts in place. A tree inventory. So this is a different type of resource assessment. You have the canopy analysis. That can tell you many things about managing the resource, but this is a more advanced management tool. You may have inventories of your other assets, of your buildings, of your sidewalks, of your streets, of your sewer lines, so you can have an inventory of your trees as well. So no one knows this one better than the utility companies, that if they prune their trees that are near their utility lines, if they do it regularly and consistently, then they have fewer outages. And so that is proven successful for the utility companies over and over and over and over again. It's part of how they do business. It's what they do. And there's no reason that the city can't try to get on board with something similar to that. And develop a good relationship with your utility provider if you don't already have that in place, which I assume you do, but... Oh, that's the next one. Engage with your local utility provider. I know that when I was a city forester, and we had a big event with trees down all over the place, I had to tell my boss, who told his boss, who told the public relations person, who told the utilities public relations person, and eventually would trickle down to their forester who was in charge of dispatching the crews to come out. I just had the guy's number in my phone, so I would just say, hey, we got a big problem over here. Can you think about getting your people over here, because I'm going to send the message up the chain back down here. There's also a lot of risk management resources out there that are freely available on the internet, that are available for download. Again, that's something our program can help connect you with if you're interested in that. So, if we aren't adopting best practices, and we aren't being intentional in how we approach the management of the resource, then how do we know if we're actually mitigating risks or contributing to risk? How do we know if we're maximizing those benefits and services or undercutting them? How do we know if we're controlling those costs or exacerbating them? The answer is that we don't. We don't know if we're not at least doing what we can, doing something to try to move the needle in a positive direction. So I frequently put this saying in my presentations because many of you have lived in Port Angeles for 20 years or more, and you've seen how it's changed over that period of time. Now, opinions in this room about how Port Angeles has changed are going to differ. Some people are going to say it's a much better place than it used to be. Other people are going to say it's not like the good old days. But nonetheless, we are benefiting from the trees that were planted and stewarded and cared for by previous generations. And as a city council, your challenge and your role and your responsibility is to make those difficult decisions about how do we position our community so that it stays and remains a good place into the foreseeable future. And nowhere in what you do as a council is that more evident with something like trees that are going to take that 60 or 80 years to mature, or at least 15 to 20 before those ecosystem services really start kicking in and making up and recouping the cost of your investment to purchase them, to plant them, to water them, to prune them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I do have some packets of information for the council, although unfortunately I'm very sorry about this. I did not plan well enough, and I do not have one for every council member, and I know that Carrie needs one for the record. But I talked to Lindsay about making sure that almost everything in here is available electronically. It's just not organized, so I will organize it and I will get it to any of you that are interested in it.
So I'll take the paper copy and then whatever Brooke's going to get first, Carrie.
So inside those packets, though, there is one of my business cards tucked into the sleeve there on the lower right-hand side. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Well, one thing we have going for us is we already really like our utility company. We have our own utilities,
great.
so it makes it a lot easier to get up and down that chain of command real quick.
Well, if you're interested, there's also a sister program to Tree City called Tree Line USA that's specific for utilities that need a different set of standards that apply to them.
So how long does it take us to become reinstated as a tree city?
Well, really, I mean, there are those 4 requirements that you designate someone on staff and have a community tree board, that you have the ordinance. So those are pieces that you already have in place. The other 2 requirements are that you proclaim and celebrate Arbor Day. So it'd be another proclamation from the mayor to proclaim a specific day, and then have a public celebration of Arbor Day, which you can proclaim any day of the year that you want.
Good.
So the Washington State Arbor Day is the second Wednesday in April, so this year it's April 11th. And the National Arbor Day is always the last Friday in April, and I can't remember that date off the top of my head.
I may have missed that this year because of our just finding out about this, but we will find another day as soon as we can.
Well, there's the sort of the Arbor Day legacy is to celebrate in the spring, but here in Washington, our best planting season is really like late September even through February. So I mean, anytime in that October, many cities celebrate sometime in October or November. If they don't
And who
celebrate.
designates Port Angeles the tree city?
The Arbor Day Foundation.
Arbor Day Foundation.
So the Arbor Day Foundation is an international nonprofit based in Nebraska.
Any other questions?
And what were the 3rd and 4th requirements?
Oh, sorry, 3rd and 4th requirements. So the celebration of Arbor Day, and then the 3rd one is, the way that it's written is an urban forestry program with a minimum budget of $2 per capita. And I'm always reluctant to use those words because in its strictest interpretation, that's not the case. So you don't have to have an urban forestry program. If you have the ordinance and the person on staff and the celebration of Arbor Day and tracking your activities and costs, that constitutes your program. So you also don't have to have a line item in the budget for $2 per capita. You can attribute the costs of what's being spent on all kinds of tree care activities across the city, across the various departments. So certainly, there's a role for trees in the planning department as well as public works, as well as parks. So if you sort of start to cobble together even the percentages of staff time and benefits that are attributed to, say, reviewing a tree plan that's submitted with the development, those costs can be attributed to that $2 per capita. So that's getting back to that tracking of your activities and costs. So I would say that to get back in, you would just have to, I encourage cities that are in the Tree City program to develop some kind of mechanism to track that information as you move through the year, because otherwise at the end of the year, it's a scavenger hunt to go back through the emails and the records and everything else and the budget documents to figure out what you spent and how it was spent. And that can be tasking if you don't have a system in place to track it all along.
So I thought that was a great presentation. I learned a lot, and I would love to do Trees in the USA as well. But to me, the takeaway is that we're kind of on the wrong trajectory in some ways when you're talking about the canopy and things like that. So I really hope we take a look at this and how we're planning future developments. And I think that trees is something that the state of Washington, we're associated with trees in the Pacific Northwest with being green. And I would love to see Port Angeles in future developments really take that to heart and get us on the right trajectory.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I really appreciate it.
Madam Mayor, if I may add a few things. We're extremely appreciative to Ben Thompson for providing the presentation tonight, and it shares a great deal of some of those creative options that we as a city to really respect the environmental assets that we have out there. And I think really it's important that we work to kind of triage some of the situations that we see out there in the Port Angeles realm. And I think some of the things that we see, including tree poaching in our creek corridors, those are absolute priorities. Those are things that we are tackling today. When we see someone cutting down a big leaf maple in one of our creek corridors, we deal with it. When we see someone cutting down a tree on a marine bluff that's jeopardizing root systems along that marine bluff, we are dealing with it. I think there's a lot of good news as far as some of the accomplishments that Scott Johns achieved for the city relative to getting us up to that program, creating policies, creating ordinances, making sure that we are set to really appreciate those assets and to preserve the existing canopy that we have in existence today. I think it's important to recognize that we're benefited by having our own utility and that the budget issues relative to Tree City USA are fully covered by the annual expenditures we have relative to simple line maintenance of our electric utility. So that's a great thing. But I'm really inspired to see a number of community members here in the audience tonight that are willing to step up and participate and really help out and make sure that the city is successful ultimately in this program at the end of the day.
So as just in closing then, just please, anyone, feel free to contact me. I know that I don't have my email address up on the screen for those of you in the audience, but I'll give it to you real briefly. So it's my name, it's Ben, ben.thompson, thompson, @dnr.wa.gov. And I'll be happy to help in any way that I can.
Thank you so much. So council, we've been sitting here for 2 hours, and I think we probably need a real quick stretch. So we will be back in 5 minutes, 8:10, guys. Come on back here at 8:10 according to that clock. One more to go. All right, okay. Deputy Mayor. All right, folks, we are getting ready to start again, so if you can please be seated or move your conversation outside, I would appreciate that. Thank you. All right, so back to business here. I guess the next order of business is G, ordinances not requiring council public hearing, is the 2018 budget amendment number 1.
Yes, we're recommending the second reading of the 2018 budget amendment number 1, and hoping that you adopt the amendment. All of the changes were presented before. We had one minor adjustment to the fund number used for the bridge barriers. We moved it into the transportation benefit district fund in order to show that it was transportation related. But other than that, everything is the same as it was presented last time. Serena is here if you have any questions that I'm unable to answer. She'll be able to assist us.
Wonderful. Well, let me read the ordinance and then we can have this discussion. It says an ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, creating a new, oops. So, an ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, amending the 2018 budget and funds. So, any discussion, council? Any questions? All right, if there's no questions, then can I have a motion?
Just a comment. I just wanted to thank Tess for her gracious time this afternoon. She did sit down with me, and I went through the numbers and the appropriate calorie forwards with this budget, and I have to commend the finance department on a great job on putting this forward. If you look at normal financial statements, the city or public utilities, or I'm sorry, public entities report a lot differently than a normal financial statement did. And so, Tess, again, thank you for your time this afternoon and working me through the numbers here. So I just want to let you know that I did have the opportunity to visit with the finance department on this.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else?
I did want to ask about the Transportation Benefit District. Are we putting everything street-related in that fund, or only the funds raised by the sales tax?
The way it is designed right now is that all transportation-related activity will go into that fund. The city will continue to contribute the average that we had done previously into the fund, so it's going to continue to get the general fund donations or contributions for projects. And I did provide Dan some information with the first tax payment that we received. For the month of January, we received $55,605 and 40%. So, and that is pretty spot on to what we had budgeted for. So January is not typically our highest sales tax month. So at this prorated rate, we'll be just under where if you just did 12 months of this, we would be just under where we had budgeted. So I fully expect to reach our 700,000 goal for the transportation district.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? All right, so I need a motion.
I move to, or we just conducted the second reading. So I move to adopt the 2018 budget amendment number 1 ordinance.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? It is unanimous that we pass the ordinance amending the budget.
You didn't check to see if there was any public comment in that.
There is.
It's not required. You're messing with me. All right. Okay. Let's see where we're at. So we are at contracts and purchasing 8th Street Bridge protective screens.
Madam Mayor, may I have the honor of addressing this?
Sure.
That is fine. This is wonderful. And I would like to make a motion to approve and authorize the city manager to, number 1, accept the state of Washington funding assistance in the amount of $350,000 and execute the funding agreement and project prospectus for state funding on the 8th Street Bridge pedestrian fence project. And number 2, award the base bid and bid additives 1 and 2, sign a construction contract with Interwest Construction, Inc. of Squid, Washington for the 8th Street Bridge pedestrian fence project TR0118 for the total bid amount of $770,770, including applicable taxes, and make minor modifications to the contract if necessary. And now I'd like to address this, please.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Who seconded?
Thank you.
This is wonderful. This will save lives. And the community stood up and said, we must have this. And because of the community to not only stand up, but to contribute their own funds, from bake sales to First Federal to individual donations. The staff has come together. We all came together over this. The council, the staff, the citizens, the entire community, we all came together and said we must do this. I'm so grateful that starting last summer, I began having meetings with Representative Mike Chapman regarding this issue. And so he was ready to hit the ground running this year when the legislature went into session. Kevin Vandeweghe helped him on the Senate side. I know Steve Derringer was supportive. So everyone, from the citizens to the council to the staff to our representatives, we made a community circle to help our community so that we can have a burden off our shoulders, all of us. There's other issues we will take up in the future, but this is the big win for our community. I'm so proud of everyone who stepped up and spoke up and said, let's do this. I'm just really proud of our community. So I want to thank everyone here, and there's much to be grateful for. And sometimes you sit on the council and we have difficult issues, and sometimes things just come together and work, and this is one of those that is working on our behalf for us now and for future generations. So I want to say thank you.
Since Councilmember Kidd thanked everyone else, I want to specifically thank her for your decade, at least, of leadership on this issue.
Okay, so, anybody else who would like to speak?
Yeah, I'd also like to thank Councilmember Kidd for being a leader on this. And you know, the really good news, this is one of those very easy ones where our engineer's estimate came in under our ballpark, and our bid looks like it's coming in underneath the engineer's estimate. And so this is a really great opportunity for us to do something good and, you know, not end up spending as much money as we thought we might have had to. And I think that, you know, it really needs to be underlined that the citizens, you know, generating $124,000 is a real, is really, and the fact that that happened was a real huge selling point, I know, for the people that were active to get the state on board, because the state could see that our community was so behind us. And, you know, hopefully we'll have a further discussion about maybe some potential budget initiatives that we can, you know, I know that a lot of this money isn't necessarily free money, because it was diverted from other projects that are important as well. But if we have some budget initiatives that we'll talk about, that will be really exciting. It's just really, it's a great day for this.
It's a great day.
Anybody else who would like to speak to this? Well, I want to bring up a comment that was brought up to me, which I don't know how appropriate it might be necessarily. They talked about how these bridges were built and they met engineering standards for the current safety barrier. And that was one of the things that, because of the height of the bridges, I'm wondering if the state has changed their regulations on those barriers and whether it's something we need to push on that and say, these barriers are not safe. Our community has found them not to be safe. Is this something that, whether it's an insurance issue or whether it's not that I want to put a lawsuit against the state, but keeping other communities safe, just like ours, if we had been required to put those barriers up higher, we would have. And so we may want to think of how to pass this message to the state to make sure that other communities don't have to go through what we did. So that was a really a good point.
I'd like to follow up on that because this is something I believe would be, I thought about before, and I'm so grateful you said that. I believe that the state needs to relook at the minimum height of bridges, especially over roads, interstates. So I hope that's maybe a recommendation we can pass on to our legislators, and I hope we can discuss this further because having the low heights on the fences over this bridge isn't the best. Yes, thank you. Best practice.
Yeah. So I think if we can do something about that, I think that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And, you know, the other comment that I was going to make is, this is a good day for us, but our work isn't done. There's still a long way to go through the stigma of mental illness to, you know, we still have a community in which the needs for behavioral health far outstrip our resources. And so this is a good step. This is, you know, something the city could put its arms around and accomplish. There's still a lot of work to do. There's still a lot of nonprofits out there doing a lot of good work that need support, that need volunteers, that need funding. So that's the next step.
And I guess one last thing I'd like to add is that we have a really creative community here, and people have asked whether we can add things to this bridge, to these barriers, so that they become pieces of art. And at first, it could be as light as putting fabric or tying ribbons or something that will make them, so I guess as the community progresses and as the art that may be brought into them, it will be seasonal. So if we can think of these as an asset that may potentially be able to display beautiful art, so that when people drive through these, they're not seeing suicide barriers, but they're actually seeing art as they go through. We might actually have a little bit more success in, bringing this forward. And it will fit within our community view of how beautiful this community is. Okay, so now we have a motion on the table and a second. Final discussion on this? No? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you so much.
All right, so let's start with council reports. Councilman?
Yes, thank you. Last week we had a, smaller than usual, but we had a group from Mutsu, Tanabu High School, and a teacher and a couple of adults that came to visit us, had a fabulous time. And it's been 20 years since Port Angeles International Relations and Moods of International Relations have been having these trips back and forth, and friendships now are into second generation, and it's affected thousands of not only children but their families, and it's just heartwarming to see how wonderful the relationships are, and it continues to grow. So I was happy to visit with them and say a few words on behalf of the city. And I look forward to the next group. It's always fun to see them.
We had a pool board meeting this Tuesday. Apparently it was the longest pool board meeting that they've ever had. And just discussed moving forward with the expansion of the pool and moving the Horizon building up to 8th Street.
I almost drew a blank, but thankfully I kicked back in. I had the opportunity to, as a board member of Transit System, to attend the annual awards ceremony for Clown Transit employees. It was a lovely event. It was really nice to see, given all the transition they've had in upper level management over the last year and a half, how everyone seemed really happy to be working for them. The feeling in the room was really nice. And it was just really nice to be able to participate in that and see what a great job they're doing and how much the employees like working there. At least the ones that were there seemed to. So that was a nice event, and it's nice that they do that for their whole staff. The other thing is that I will report, Councilmember French and I went and met with Christy at United Way, and it was really nice to meet her and talk to her a little bit more about what they're doing. And it just reminded me again how exciting it is to be in a position to be able to work with other organizations and really potentially make some positive changes in our community, and how many great people there are working for those organizations right now. I think between city staff and councils and the people running those organizations, we really have a great group of people working to tackle some of the big issues in our community. So that was exciting. And we took the bus, which was a nice way to use our bus passes and remember how fun it is to take a bus.
Councilmember Schroeder.
Oh, I unfortunately didn't go to very many meetings the last 2 weeks. But I do want to mention housing and affordable housing. The flip side of affordable housing is just homelessness. I came from the Clown County Homelessness Task Force meeting earlier this afternoon, and we're in a situation here in Clown County where we have a 1.8% vacancy rate in our rentals. An ideal vacancy rate would be more like 6%, where people can find housing when they're looking for it as tenants, but landlords are able to make money as landlords by being able to rent, and so we're way below that. Doc Robinson, who directs Serenity House, was like, look, Seattle's complaining and they have a 3.4% vacancy rate. We're at 1.8. So we need to do stuff about affordable housing. We need to do it in the near term, not the long term. So that's something that I look forward to working on. I look forward to bringing some ideas together at the next think tank that the council has on April 19th. So thank you all for that. And let's see, I've talked to Allison in Nathan's department, but I look forward to talking to Nathan about some of these ideas as well.
Councilmember French?
Yeah, I'm excited about those ideas too, because one of the things that I had I had a really good time touring the Valley Creek. And to call it a good time is kind of weird because we saw some really interesting things. So we went with a group of citizens that helped do a lot of cleanup of the encampments in Valley Creek. And there's a lot of public officials there. Allison was there from the City Hall. And Mike Chapman, our representative, the competent prosecutor, Mark Nichols, and Brian, our chief of police, of course. It was a really great opportunity. I got to see, I haven't hiked up Valley Creek in my whole life, which was, I don't know why I didn't get more, because it's a really beautiful area. And a lot of things kind of were going through my mind during that trip. There was a lot of, ugly things that we saw where there's a lot of potential ecological damage being done by people, camping in there. But there's a lot of encouraging things because it was great to see that community on Valley Creek get involved in, helping maintain the standards of their own neighborhood. But it brought to mind housing, like he was bringing up, that we need to have serious conversations about housing policy at all levels of government. We need to have conversations with the city council of what we can do. We need to be advocating those conversations at the county level and talking to state officials too, because it really feels like, at best, we're just pushing people around. If they are camping here and we clean it up, we're moving them to the next easiest place for them. And that doesn't feel like a long-term solution. So it was really a great experience. I'm glad I went, and I learned a lot. The other great thing I got to do was a strategic long-term budgeting webinar with some of the financial staff. I learned a lot. There wasn't too many advanced accounting terms that they had to teach me. But it was a really great process. It was a great webinar. It was something that, they mentioned the city got through some strategic long-term budgeting in around 2013. And it seemed like that was, pretty helpful in, navigating us through the mill transition that we're going through. So I would really like us to see us revisit that once we kind of get through that transition. But I brought the slides and gave them to Lindsay to look at because he was interested, and if anybody else wants to see them, I can scratch them back up. The other great thing I got to go to was the Hamilton. There was an open house at Hamilton Elementary School last week for the 10th Street reconstruction. I would just like to commend the staff. I thought they were really great. They were super engaging. The project manager, I can't remember his name, but he was just right there talking to citizens, being really personable. They took really great notes. The citizens had a lot of good comments. I thought it was a really great event that showcased the staff really well. I just thought that was, I thought it was great. So, yeah, that's it.
Okay, Councilmember Warren?
I have two things. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to personally thank Elizabeth Strait and Carrie Bailey Rodriguez for helping me work through the Outlook council venue calendar. Their extraordinary patience and professionalism with myself and my IT department, which happened to be my wife, was another example of the wonderful staff that we are blessed with here in Port Angeles from top to bottom. These folks took an hour to help me understand what Outlook really is. And so I thank you for that. And Dan, I would like to compliment you and your staff, especially Elizabeth. Please pass along my sincere, heartfelt thanks for her patience with me. You know, I still can't understand how you can turn off the computer by pressing the start button. So anyway, the second thing that I had, the very interesting and pleasurable experience of attending was this, on March 24th, there was this multiple self-help housing groundbreaking ceremony on West 11th Street and the 1800 block. 6 families, you may have seen this article in the paper on Sunday. 6 families worked on building their own homes. And we talk about the homeless problem. There are 6 people that are going to spend 32 hours a week building their own house. It's not that they're getting hired contractors. They are actually going to do the hammering of the nails and everything. In addition to raising their families and doing their own, fulfilling their own obligations to their jobs. And so it was an extraordinary experience to meet these people and watch how excited they were at the opportunity of having their own home. That's the good news. The bad news is I asked them, how long did it take you to get to this point? And the average was about 2.5 years. And I asked, so you're talking about what can we do for homeless? Here's people that are willing to work 32 hours a week to build their own home. They're not asking for a handout. They're not homeless or camping anywhere. They want to really put the sweat equity in. And I asked them, what was the biggest drawback? And here it is. This is just the application for stormwater permits. This thing would choke an elephant. I can't believe the amount of bureaucracy that's involved in this thing. We keep telling ourselves that we need more affordable housing, we need to help the homeless and stuff like that, but all we do is throw these kinds of bureaucratic roadblocks in front of people. I'm telling you folks, if we want to help the homeless and to do affordable housing, we got to do something about this kind of stuff. I'm all for protecting the environment, but this is ridiculous. I mean, you had to thumb through this thing to realize what these people had to go through just to be able to dig their own dirt, to build their own house. And I think it was a very, very heartwarming experience to meet these 6 folks, and I can't wish them enough good luck in the future. And they're going to spend a year at this building their own homes. And I encourage you to look into this and see what we can do as a council to help these people and this program that through the Peninsula Housing Authority, expedite more people that are willing to put this sweat equity in and really build their American dream. Thank you.
And so this week, I guess it was last week, I met with Eric Kilmer's brother, who was in the panel on that HOPE. It dealt with suicide prevention and suicide and youth. And it was put on by the kids and students. And it was just wonderful to get to see these kids being involved so early, so young, and so it just, so they organized the whole thing, and it was just really, really wonderful. That was quite interesting. Also, the AmeriCorps were out there today, and I hope that maybe the press could just give them a little shout out there. I got a couple of pictures I took from there. They spent from 9 to 3 trying to clear out all the stuff in Francis Street Park, so I guess the 9/11 Memorial Park. And so they did a really great job of cleaning that out. And it was just so nice to see these young folks really, putting all this energy into making our place just look so much nicer. And then I got the Marine Resources 101 on exactly how all those groups came together. Because it's a pretty mixed place where you have MSRC fund, the foundation, and then the community itself, and then in between. So at least I'm starting to understand a little bit more about how this Marine Resources Committee can really help us and how they're functioning. They get some funds and from ecology, and so how we can best interact with that to try to continue to maintain our environment in a pristine condition if we can. So that is my report. Here and information. So city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We do have a couple items that I'd like to bring to your attention. The first one is the Port Angeles Police Department's 2017 year-end report. It's a fairly comprehensive report, has a lot of great information, and I know that the police chief loves talking about it, so if any of you have any questions, feel free to get hold of Brian, and he will definitely spend time with you on the report. A lot of good information. And before Deputy Mayor Dexter talks about the draft agenda for the upcoming joint meeting, I do have a couple of action items that I'll go through with you that came out of tonight's meeting. One of the items that came out of the meeting was we know that Sargent Engineering will be providing the city with a recommended load rating for City Pier. We will ensure after the comments by the council tonight and the concerns that were expressed that before we make any final payment to Sargent Engineers, that we get the appropriate report with the appropriate stamps, and if we need additional information, we'll make sure we provide that back to the council if needed. But we'll be moving forward with that. The other item that came up that the council kind of nodded their head, most of you, was on the minimum height issue for state-approved railing or fence height on the bridge. I'm just recommending, but I think a good way to approach that would be during our legislative advocacy when we deal with state issues. We can describe our experiences in Port Angeles and talk about the fact that there are situations throughout the state that if you can justify it, there may, or there should be, maybe an option that provides for a higher height fence or railing that is actually funded in part by the state during time of construction. And that might include things like a history where the bridges have been used for suicide attempts, and or where you have a bridge that is over another roadway and you're concerned about people throwing debris off of the bridge or things landing on the road below. So again, that might be an appropriate venue for that. And start with that, and then we can hear from our legislators if there are other ways that we can maybe make an impact in that area. But again, that's a good way to maybe approach that. So we have a lot of other things. We'll be moving forward immediately with the fencing or the barriers on the bridge. And of course, we have an ordinance too, a new ordinance.
And one thing that I know that we've been talking about the housing, is it possible to start kind of looking at the schedules with the county commissioners so that we can have a little bit of a town hall on the housing? I know we're going to do a housing assessment, but I think it's important to include the county commissioners specifically on that.
So I do believe, and it's kind of interesting to bring that up tonight, I was approached by Randy Johnson this morning that he would like me to give him a call. I believe that he's going to suggest, I thought that's what I heard this morning, I was dealing with some other things, suggest a joint meeting, and so this would be one of those joint topics.
I just want to add too, in the Clallam County Homelessness Task Force, I think it was Commissioner Johnson announced that the next County Board of Health meeting on April 17th at 1:30 p.m. is going to be on housing. So that's April 17th. I believe 1:30 p.m. but double check the commissioners meeting room over the county for Board of Health meeting on housing.
Really?
If appropriate, I wanted to ask Chief Smith if, in the report you talk about use of force and statistics from this year to last year, but there's some bigger long-term statistics that I know you've shared about reduction in use of force overall and how much that's been, if that's an okay thing to share in this venue.
Sure, so you're talking about just the trends, say, over the last 9 or 10 years. Yeah, our annual reports, every year we do a report on use of force that's a accreditation standard, so you compare them all, which we didn't do. You'll see a steady trend downward. It doesn't always go down, but it's steady trend downward that, I think you and I talked about this, that there's a lot of factors, training, how we operate, in teams, maybe the modern, paradigms and ways you can do things. interesting, one of our student interns this summer has a project assignment to do a much more in-depth analysis on these supports for us. Actually copying the LAPD model, they did a great kind of look back at their use of force, and so we're gonna steal that from them.
All right, so I guess from here on, we're moving to the second public comment period. So if there's anybody in the audience who would like to get up and speak to the council, please come to the microphone, give us your name and address for the record.
Moss 1108 Slippery Street. I just have a trivial piece of information to offer. Mr. Moran, you showed the PDN slender plastic bag that the paper comes in when it's wet days, and the rubber band. You didn't show the rubber band, but on dry days it comes with a rubber band. Actually, you do not need to throw those away. It turns out the carriers pay for their own rubber bands and plastic bags. They're very happy to get them back. And one very easy, very funny way to save them is use the inside of a toilet paper for the rubber bands and the inside of like a saran paper, just roll up the bags on them. I sometimes drop them off to the PDN office, sometimes I leave them at my door with a note, and I always get a little cute, sweet thank you note for that simple contribution. So that's one item we can eliminate from throwing out.
Yeah, thank you for that. We recycle them, but I get them rain or shine. So, but I think that giving them back is a great idea. Thank you for that.
Anybody else? Yes.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Dunn. I used to live at 529 Whitby Avenue, and now I live at 1173 Dan Kelly Road. And I wasn't planning to testify tonight, but I made it to the end of the meeting, and it reminds me to thank you all for your service, because these long meetings, you deal with a lot of difficult issues, so thank you. So I was inspired by Ben's presentation, and his talk about how trees are a really important part of our infrastructure. And I've been before the City Council talking about a particular tree, which I think is a great example. That tree is a sequoia tree in Lions Park, which is about over 60 years old, and it provides a number of ecosystem services. And I didn't actually know the tree was going to be, it was proposed for removal, and I didn't know about that, and there wasn't a public process for me to find that out. And I learned about it through a neighbor. And after learning about it, I found that I wasn't the only person that was concerned about the removal of the tree. And so that highlights the need for a public process, because the urban tree canopy is a community resource that belongs to all of us. And through that process, we worked with the city, and we did have an assessment of the tree to determine whether it needed to be removed. That assessment, which was paid for by the city, determined that the tree was healthy, but determined that recommended removal. And I'm not clear where things stand, but there's a final determination on that. I think my understanding is that there's differences of opinion as to whether a tree needs to be removed when it's perfectly healthy and has codominant leader stems. But kind of putting that piece aside is this question of the ecosystem services that tree provides. And it does provide significant ecosystem services. And I think it's important to have that assessed. And this is an example, and I think it's a great example, but to have those ecosystem services assessed before we lose a tree like that, a significant tree in our community, and to have a process for that. So I would ask that there be thought put into that for this particular tree, but then thought put into a process so when there are significant trees that are slated for possible removal, that there be a process to involve the public, to get comment, and to actually work with the public, because the public is a great resource for the administration and for the city council as we work through these issues. So I think that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else who would like to speak to council? All right, so it looks like we made it to the end of our agenda, and we are adjourned. Thank you.